Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Out War, episode number 120. 120, Rosie.
Is it really?
120. And I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you in so long.
Yes.
And we haven't recorded in a long time because various reasons. But man, the Rona hit my house over the holidays. I was diagnosed with Corona on Christmas Day.
Nice.
So I was under for a couple weeks there, just under the weather. You know, it wasn't bad for me.
Yeah.
But it got to two other people in my family, and the ones that had already had it didn't get sick. So there you go. I guess there's something to be said for that. But
Almost like a natural immunity or something like that?
almost like there would be some kind of natural immunity, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah.
You mean like the body could
Fight off.
fight off something? That's so crazy.
I know.
That's so crazy. It's almost like it was designed that way by like someone who was looking out for us or something.
I don't know. Maybe.
That's
you're
crazy.
You're getting crazy now.
Yeah, that's right.
We need just to put more stuff into our bodies to
Yeah.
fight these things. But yeah, so it was kind of a crazy time there. And
Yeah. I got my 15th booster over the...
you're at 15? Only 15?
Yeah, I've been slacking.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you are still ahead of New York, which
Yeah.
they're like on 4th, I think, or something like that.
I broke into a Walgreens and I stole all the ones I could, and I
You just
I was maxing myself. Yeah, I was like,
you look like a pincushion.
yeah,
Have you seen the meme with the dude with the head and he's like NLP, what is it, the
and
NPL,
and
the non-player,
yeah,
what is it?
NPC.
NPC.
No,
It's the NPC with it's literally like, it looks like a mohawk full of
needles.
syringes and like all of them. And then you got that Chad dude with the beard.
Yeah.
And he's like, they're both saying, why won't he die?
Yeah,
But anyways, yeah, man. But it was crazy. And we have a really great episode. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But so what do you know, man?
Hey, did you know? This is pretty cool. That when the Soviets attempted to poison the president of Afghanistan in 1979, he unwittingly survived the assassination by drinking Coca-Cola as the acidic drink diluted the poison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about lucky.
Yeah. So, even though I gave up Coke, I gave up all soda for the new year.
Cool. And I can testify. There's a bottle of water here,
bottle of water,
and you
yeah.
finished one off already.
Yeah, I haven't drinking any soda.
Good for you.
But maybe I should, because now I'm going to survive assassination attempts.
Right. Yeah.
Only if they poison me, though.
Only if they poison you with something that Coke's the antidote.
Yeah.
But
But there you go. Coke Zero is medicine.
it is medicine.
Officially confirmed.
Confirmed. Hey, you know what? I didn't even say anything either. We want to congratulate Rachel on the birth of her
Yes.
little baby girl.
Yes.
On your birthday.
On my birthday.
Isn't that awesome?
It's beautiful.
That's so cool. If you guys know Rachel, go to her Instagram. You've probably seen it already. It's been a week or so since the baby little girl was born. She's sweet, beautiful. Rachel's doing great. We're really happy for her and Andrew. Doing the thing, making a family.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Now that's why she hasn't been on, because she's was super pregnant.
That's right. She took a break because she was pregnant. Now you've had the baby. Rachel, get back on. Where are you?
Come on, woman.
Where
I
are
need
you? You had the baby. Come on. The hard work's done. Anyways.
Yeah. I got another did you know, since we've been so long.
Yes. Tell me.
Do you know what the difference between pigeons and doves are?
Are pigeons like the redneck version of a dove? Like the redneck cousin?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, they're literally the same animal.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, there's no difference.
They're just different colors?
Yeah, well,
White and gray versus white?
Well, it doesn't have to be. So this is interesting. It says, to the layman, which is me, the difference between pigeons and doves has something to do with color, maybe. So you're a layman.
I'm a layman.
Yeah. Or a location. Or general appeal. Doves usually get much better press than pigeons do. Yeah. But what is the actual scientific difference between pigeons and doves? There isn't one. It says the word dove is a word that came into English from more Nordic languages, whereas pigeon came into English from French. So it says both dove and pigeon refer to, this is why there's different ones, 308 species of birds.
Wow.
So there's 308 different
Species
that make up pigeons or doves.
Right.
It says there's no difference between a pigeon and a dove in scientific nomenclature, but colloquial English tends to categorize them by size. Something called a dove is generally smaller than something called a pigeon, but that's not always the case. A common pigeon, for example, is called both a rock dove and a rock pigeon. It says people have their own classification for what makes them different. So in the Pacific, for example, the big ones might get called pigeons and the smaller ones might be called doves, but they're more actually closely related with each other than they are to other things than, say, in South America that are called pigeons and doves.
Okay. All right.
It says, the difference boils down to linguistic traditions. So feel free to tell people you're releasing pigeons at your wedding or that you're feeding doves in the park.
Or I think the dove just had better PR management.
Yep.
Attached itself to Christianity and got the whole Holy Spirit thing going, because it's like a dove going up and down. Like the dove is the symbol of the Holy Spirit. So I think their PR management was better than the pigeon. The pigeon's like, you son of a... The dove's like, sorry, sucker.
What do they call them? Flying squirrels?
Flying squirrels?
Because they're just like nuisances, pigeons.
Oh, rats. Flying
rats,
yeah.
So, it might make sense that we come up with something more beautiful than a flying rat to describe the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
It gives its own classification.
Yeah.
I'm sure that those doves were very beautiful and not like these ugly...
Yeah, those ones, the gray with like the green and purple on their necks. It's actually not horrible. They just look like they're overweight with skinny legs and stuff.
I got a pigeon tattoo, actually.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Somewhere?
It's a story. I'll have to tell a story someday.
Okay.
It says it's my mom tattoo with a pigeon.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, I have seen it, but I never really looked at it that way, like up close.
Yeah, I'm allergic to red ink, so I can't get the heart for mom. So.
You're allergic to red ink? Man, did you find that out the hard way?
Yeah, I got stuff that's like still...
Really?
Yeah.
How can you find out if you're allergic to an ink color?
They just use it.
And then you get screwed up.
Well, it's just like it doesn't heal properly.
Swells up or something?
Yeah.
Or itchy?
It's still a little rough. Yeah. I got stuff down here. It's from like...
I know your leg, it's really colorful.
Yeah. It's probably like 7 years old and there's still little...
Wow.
Bumpy parts. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Anyways.
Man, so I just want to make this podcast episode is really cool. I'm so happy we did this for the first one for the new year for 2022. Going into this new year, I think it's a great start episode, and our guest is really phenomenal. If you are a single guy, or if you're a guy, this is going to speak to you, and if you're a lady, this is going to help you understand what you might want to look for in a man if you're single, and what your husband should be trying to strive for. So I think this is going to be a dynamic episode. It might be a little challenging for some, hopefully educational, hopefully encouraging. But nonetheless, as I've always said, and I will continue to say, sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
Well, hello, everybody. We have a wonderful guest on the podcast tonight. I'm excited about this one. The backstory on this is kind of cool. I was scrolling through Instagram. I think I was on Reels, and I don't do that a whole lot, but when I was on that, this one reel came up, and this guy was just spitting facts about being a man, having confidence, and just tied in perfectly with some of the things that I had been thinking about a little bit for my 18-year-old son, and for some men that I know that are, trying to prepare themselves for marriage. And so I clicked on the link, watched probably 4 or 5 of his reels, and then I decided, man, this guy, I'd love to have him come on the podcast. So here we are. His name is Luke. His Instagram account is Narrowway Man. at Instagram, and you can find him there. Encourage you to, we'll put a link to his Instagram account in the show notes as well. But I just want to welcome to the podcast, Luke. Luke, how are you, man?
Doing great, Turner. Thank you so much. How are you guys?
We are doing good.
Good.
Yeah, this is our first recording of the new year, so we're kind of getting back in the saddle, shake the rust off a little bit. We had a little break there, but I'm really stoked that you agreed to come on. On your Instagram account profile, it says masculine identity, biblical principles, relationship dynamics, and holistic manhood. And I just thought that was so well put. And if there's a need that I can pinpoint in the church today, is all of those things for men. It's pretty timely. But I wanted to ask you, how did you become, like, what made you decide to start this Instagram account, and what's sort of the background on that a little bit?
Big question, Turner, but I'm happy to take a quick stab at it. So, I think a little background, I grew up in the church, great family, great parents, great upbringing. Was it perfect? No, none are, but it was great. And I'm super thankful for it. And I grew up with a lot of guys like me in the church, parents trying to do the right thing. And I woke up one day, married for about 2.5 years, and I realized that something was wrong. I realized that the method and the identity, the priorities of the ideal, if you will, Christian man in sort of the evangelical world was just broken. Because I could see myself living that narrative out in my marriage, in my church, in my work, and just so many things were not working out that I felt like I was told would work out if I stuck to this original narrative. And of course, what is the narrative in the church? As you alluded to, it's broken. The church as a whole, the Western church, to be more specific, a lot of times we get very centered in our own experience in the West, and it's not the same way in the rest of the world. But in the West, we have a weakened, softened, secularized, modernized version of masculinity that, with the best of intentions, has been taught to boys, young men, and is now being taught to boys and young men. And it creates, long story short, just sadly unmet expectations and a lot of young men that don't really feel like the men that they feel like they need to be. And they don't know why. And they're not getting the results with finding a woman or just asserting themselves into the world or feeling confident at all. And I found myself in that category. And it wasn't until really just doing a lot of research honestly online and just figuring out, wow, there's a lot of people that feel this way. So that kind of birthed a journey that got me started.
Wow. So when you basically were started to seek out what really needed to happen to help with your marriage and with your own kind of fulfillment. Is that what I'm reading right?
Yes. Initially there was never an intent to, start an Instagram account or anything like that. It was just, I literally got on Google and I was just, I felt so guilty, Turner, because a lot of I guess I have to explain it a little bit. I'm trying to summarize without going into detail, but
Sure.
Here's an easy one. In the church, generally speaking, the evangelical church, there is almost an idolatry of the family.
Yes.
To the point where, and it's all from good intentions, but we idolize and pedestalize the family to the point where so many young men and older men too wrap up their entire identity in the quote unquote success of their family unit, which, as you well know, Turner, a man of your age knows this by now.
Wait
you
a
can't
second.
do that.
My age? What? No, I'm just kidding.
You can't do that. Well,
right. You're right.
Yeah, you have an 18-year-old daughter. That in and of itself tells me, okay, there's plenty of experiences you've been through to know, even if I do everything quote unquote right, which is, hard to do for more than 5 minutes. But let's say you do it, you go on a great streak and you have a good batting average as a father, as a husband for a week. That still doesn't mean things are going to go well for you.
Right.
There's not a set list of rules you can follow. And what happens is we go to church, we go through all these teachings, trainings, discipleship, well-meaning principles and all these things. And a lot of them are, straight out of the scripture. But what ends up happening is this expectation of, awesome, so if I do this, then my family's going to turn out great.
Right.
And that is the measure of a good Christian man, is how he relates to his wife and how his children are. And it's just so broken, because that's not, even in scripture, you find examples of men who, did their best and are considered men of God who did not have amazing results in the family department.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not that should be, fine. We shouldn't just, roll over and be like, it is what it is. That's not what I'm saying. But when you put your identity in those things, which my identity was wrapped up in, how does my wife treat me? Or how's my marriage going? A moment in time. How is it today? How is it this year? When your identity is wrapped up in those things, it turns you into a soft, emasculated version of what God wants men to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of going off of that, in a different, the other angle of like what you're getting at about the wrapping up everything, if the church is promoting, like the family, the ultimate, again, this isn't, necessarily saying what the church is or isn't saying, but if the idea is coming across that like a man's ultimate fulfillment of like God's will for him is to have a family, and like that end point is like you can't be a complete man without it, is saying like to people like myself, like I'm not married right now, I've never been married, that like you gotta turn sorry, it's on vibrate. The other side of that is saying like if the greatest fulfillment that a man can be is having a family, that like somehow I am less of a man because I don't, like that's the other side of what you were talking about, right? Like if we
exactly
wrap up everything and then and that's where this stuff comes up with like single guys, like if I definitely want to be married and I'm making efforts to I'm like
right.
I'll just say like I would like to be married, so it's not something I'm down putting, but a lot of guys that I know like from church and stuff like that, young adults groups, are, if I'm not married by some, and I was going to say I'm a traditionalist, like I have no problem by saying, like men in the 50s or, whenever some other time, it's, my parents, when they were my age, had 2 kids and they had their own house, they had like a third on the way. And if I measure up myself comparing to my parents, then, like I'm less of that or whatever. And so I know guys that like still say like, I'm 24 and I'm not married yet, I'm a failure. And then they internalize that. And then they're like, well, if I'm going to be a failure like that. So it's a very real thing that you're talking about, not just like across the board masculinity. It's not just the marriage, it's before that. And, guys, I know that's where, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but I'm just throwing it out. That's when all of a sudden, the porn addiction, the stuff about, I'm sure you're familiar, you talked about the internet, like MGTOW, men go their own way, like that movement, or, right. That kind of stuff where these guys are just saying like, well, if I'm not married now, I'm going to, do something else or, find other ways of that. So
fulfillment or something.
Yeah. Of like that thing, because the church puts it up on such a high pedestal.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to derail that, but it was just the complete, other side of the coin of what you're talking about is so true.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and the reason I didn't really wake up to how broken masculinity was, I mean, I knew it was broken, but it didn't hit home for me until it did, because let's just say, I was a high performing young man, in the sense that, on paper, I was involved in the right things. I got good grades. I worked hard, had held down jobs, that kind of thing. I worked out. I was, in the Word, involved in ministry, all these things. I got married to a beautiful young woman who came from a good family, and I was checking off all the boxes.
Right.
And that was kind of a curse, in the sense of, you don't realize that you're completely missing the boat. Because all of those things are outward, right? Mm-hmm. And God looks at the heart. And there's a resurgence, Rosie, to your point, there's multiple kind of resurgences of these men waking up and realizing this isn't right. Something's missing, Mm-hmm. Some of it's a rebellion against church. Some of it's a rebellion against feminism, mm-hmm. which I'm not entirely opposed to. Some of it's a rebellion against,
neither are we.
Some of it's a rebellion against marriage, right? Which that's not the answer.
Yeah.
And it all comes from this place of pain, right? A place of pain and frustration. We have this thing deep within us that we know we're destined for more. And whatever we've been given just isn't cutting it anymore. So no, I don't think you derailed it at all, Rosie. I think that is the other side of the coin. And, one that I'm experiencing now, to kind of cut to the end of the story, after I kind of started going through this process, right, of, man, what does it mean to be a man? Just kind of reinventing or rediscovering myself, who I am, mm-hmm. In God's eyes. My wife was going through a similar process at the same time, and long story short, she left. She left me. She was waking up to her upbringing and her the things that she was raised to believe, and realizing that she wanted to reject them. Mm. So we both went through our own journeys, and now, to your point, Rosie, I'm on the other side of it, where I can feel, and nobody says this, but by our actions and by where we put emphasis as a church, we often hint at the idea that, unless you're married with kids, you don't matter as much as a man.
Yeah. Well, I would say too, well, first of all, Luke, thanks for sharing that. I know that's deeply personal, and I appreciate you being willing to share that with us, about your marriage. One of the things that to your point, is I've noticed this, that in particular in when people begin to get above the age of 25, the big question is, especially if they're in a relationship, they're like, so when are you guys going to get married? When are you going to, when's that going to happen? And it seems to be a pressure thing that's put on there, rather than just esteeming the value of that individual for the body of Christ in that congregation. They're serving, they're doing whatever they're doing, and maybe they're just trying to get by, because they're maybe a little bit broken. And so it does need to be an adjustment, I think, from the church's viewpoint on how they relate to people that are not married, or formerly married, or just in that phase of life, in that season of whatever you want to call it, of being single. And what's amazing to me is that in your, the story for you is through that whole thing that you went through, it really was an awakening for you to realize where your confidence comes from, what it means to truly be a man. And that's my other side of this thing, is that I think men's ministries too, and I don't want to pick on the church. It's not like I'm here to pick on the church, but I think men's ministries also in some way sell and speak to those guys like in my position, where they have a family, they have kids, they've been married for a certain amount of years or whatever. And it's very difficult for a single guy, or a guy that's maybe doesn't have kids yet, or a newlywed, to really fit in and really glean from those if they're supposed to. So right. I think, yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say kind of just like another thing, an interesting point, kind of going along with this, and maybe we can stop picking on the church so much, or whatever it is. I got no problem picking on the church, anyways, but by no means. But this just popped into my head. The same kind of thing, along the same lines of, I have some. I'm trying to think of a way to say it so that they're not. I'll frame it like this. I guess if you run enough in like these very conservative, I'm going to use like small O Orthodox, Protestant, like Bible believing churches, maybe like some Southern Baptist church, or a church that I would say is, Orthodox conservative in the sense of like they teach biblical values. They're not weird. And I love picking on Catholics, and I have my own issues, and I'm not supporting Catholicism, but I know that like traditional Catholics have the same kind of value about this, about have a big family, and and maybe more so, but I know like from homeschool Protestant people have the same kind of value of if you don't have a big family, you're not really out there doing the commission, the very first commandment that God gave is, to be fruitful and multiply. And if you're not having as many kids as you can, as you can't afford, like at the time. And so I was going to say, it just thought about this at the same time, is the same way I've seen friends that like have had issues for whatever reason having kids, like they can't have kids, and they feel less than from the churches at the same time, or, people get married and they're like, oh, why aren't you having kids yet? You should be having kids now. Like all this kind of stuff that even if you got to the point of, reaching this next level, all this top down kind of emphasis that's being placed on this is now it's like, okay, you have a wife. Why aren't you making kids? Like it's always this next thing. Why aren't you raising them right?
Even historically, biblically, when you read in the Bible, women that could not bear children, it was considered a curse.
Right.
Like in the Old Testament, and they thought they were cursed by God.
Yeah.
So there's a huge pressure put on women in particular in that situation where there's, children where they can't, or they're struggling to get pregnant, or they're waiting on God to do that. That's a whole big rigmarole. But Luke, I was going to ask you you said you're on the other side of it now. And what was the biggest thing that you had to make adjustment wise on, as you were transitioning into what, this new biblical masculinity that you were trying to live out?
That's a great question. So really basically going through something like that, it really shakes you to your core. If, I think God has given most young men a fierce tenacity and dedication that if they latch on to something, they can be just extremely attached and strong and hold fast to that. I think that's just that stability is something that the masculine has that God's blessed us with. And whenever you do that with something, and it's taken away from you, or worse yet, that person that you're holding on to decides to leave. It shakes you to your core and really has you look deep down inside and say, who am I? What is the meaning of my life? What matters? What doesn't matter? And emerging from that were a couple realizations. And the first one is that men typically identify themselves by what they do and what they can measure, and very much tangible things. And I had to realize that that's just it's so worldly. And the trick, and it's not of God. The problem with it is, the tricky part is, I guess, is that so many things in our lives are great. Marriage is great. Family and children are great. And a marriage that goes well is great. And children that grow up well and do great things are great. And it's whenever our identity shifts into those things and away from God that that we get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either a subtle sort of trouble that you never notice and you spend your whole life with your identity falsely placed, or if God is merciful, it's a trouble that you do notice because he kind of rug pulls you, or he graciously, through pain, through trials, through whatever the case may be, shines a light on the fact that your identity does not need to be there. And that's essentially what happened to me over time, and is still happening. I haven't arrived by any means, but I would say now I know that my identity is from one thing only. Mm-hmm. And that is, when God looks at me, he says, mine.
Yeah. Yep.
You're mine.
You know,
that's where it all starts.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. But
you're good.
Okay. Yeah. So that's great. What you just said to me about that, though, is very interesting, because in particular, when you're in a situation where you can't control the outcome and you can't stop what's happening. I had a friend of mine tell me one time, he's like, Turner, the only thing you can control is what you think, what you say, and what you do. That's it. You have no control over your wife, what she thinks, what she says, or what she does. And so the minute that you accept that and realize that that's the only, what is in your control, what you can handle, the better you're going to be. And it was such wise words, because in that moment, when you realize that you can't control other people, even the best people make big mistakes and do stupid things and hurt other people. It releases from you a response mechanism that would probably make it worse. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and learning that is really hard. Like, I remember one time I had a friend of mine going through some stuff, and, being a pastor for 16 years, I was, unfortunately I was in a lot of counseling situations with people and marriages and so forth. And I can remember just speaking to this man about his marriage, and he was in a situation where his wife wanted to leave him. And, he had basically set the marriage on cruise control. He checked all the boxes, going to church every week, serving in the church, all the Christian boxes that we would check, that you were mentioning earlier. And his wife still was unfulfilled, wanted to leave. And he had kind of set the marriage on cruise control and was taking for granted the marriage, and that she would, because she was a Christian, she would just kind of go along and submit, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened is it shook his confidence to the core, because this person who he thought was with him for the end was wanting out. And in that confidence shaking, he realized, as you said, the only thing he had left was Jesus. That was it. And he also had to come to a place where he realized that if she was going to be with him, that was going to be her advantage. In other words, if she chose to stay in the marriage, it was going to be good for her, because he was a good guy and he was going to treat her right, and he was going to take care of her, and he was going to protect her and love her and serve her the way Christ would want him to do that. But if she didn't, that was her loss, And once he kind of came to that term, it gave him so much confidence, because he was so insecure, and it was shaken to the core when she wanted to roll out. And so, I don't know if that speaks to anybody listening, or, in any way, but I just remember walking through that with this guy, and, it thankfully the Lord blessed him, and he was able to rescue his marriage. It didn't fall apart, and, things got better. But I think that that's part of it too. Guys don't fully understand kind of how that is supposed to work. We've been painted this picture of what biblical manhood, masculinity looks like, and some of it's unachievable, Oh
man, that resonates. It takes me back. I think one of the best examples of that sort of idea, where does your confidence come from? So identity and confidence, I think, are very closely related, but confidence is sort of how the identity is fleshed out. And I think a beautiful biblical example of that speaks to your story there, Turner, is that of Moses, that familiar story where he's called into this position of leadership at the burning bush. And, God gives him this calling and says, you're going to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Kind of a big deal. And Moses immediately, I'm not sure how his identity was at that moment, probably not very strong, but I know his confidence immediately went to his capabilities, to his skill set, to his competence. That's immediately where his mind went. And he's thinking, I stutter a lot. I'm not very good at speaking. So this is not going to work. And that is where so much of masculinity is today, especially in the church, is we immediately try to root our confidence in our abilities. And that's what the world wants us to do.
Yeah.
But God says, no, your confidence is not in your abilities. Your confidence is in the calling, the divine calling that I am placing on you right now. And you don't need to worry about your abilities because I'm the one who calls you. And in your example with the husband, it is a miracle and a blessing, answered prayer, that he was able to come to that realization, not just hear it, not just, know it, but deep down inside, understand, you know what? All I have is Jesus. Jesus is all I need. And you know what? Jesus is really good. Jesus is all anyone needs. And if this woman stays with me, she's going to stay in the calling that I have to be a godly husband to her. And I'm not going to do it right. I'm not going to do it perfectly, but it is a divine calling. And that's all I need to know. All I need to know is I belong to Jesus and I have a divine calling to be a husband, and I'm going to live it out. And that's it. Your confidence doesn't need to come from, are you 6'3" with 6-pack abs, 6 figures? No. It doesn't need to come from your frame control. None of those things. Your bank account. None of those things.
Yeah.
It comes from, I am a child of God, and He's given me a divine calling, and I have faith that He will equip me to carry out that calling.
That's right.
Despite my imperfections. And if you can be confident in that, that's the cheat code. I mean, the beautiful thing about Christianity is we can talk for hours and hours about the complexities of theology, the complexities of redemption and all these things, and we can also make it really simple too. Yeah. And that's the really simple side of masculinity. You're a child of God, you're a son of the King, and you have a divine calling. And if you want to be confident in that, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. I was going to say, kind of moving along the same trajectory, because I don't think we actually asked you, I just think this is kind of where the conversation, at least in my head, was going to, is what would you say are what does biblical masculinity mean, in the sense of because that was a perfect example. I'm not 6'3". I definitely don't have a 6-pack, and that's not me. But and I don't have fancy car, all that stuff, whatever. But there are examples, I would say, that I think is. I think of Samson, this big, strong, good-looking dude who...
Or was he?
What do you mean?
Or was he?
Oh, you think he was small?
Well, miracle of God. All that strength had to come from God. What if he was like a weakling-looking dude?
I never thought about that. I always assumed that he was the big Chad,
But yeah. David was handsome, Rudy. They said that he was, of this...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Or there also talks about his mighty men, David's warriors and all these things. I always just picture, whenever I go back to his the movie 300, just like Gerard Butler and all the dudes. I just picture all the warriors like that,
oiled up 6-packs.
Yeah, exactly. Except not gay, the Greeks were. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so I was just gonna say, I think it would be kind of a good thing. What in your, and I know it is kind of tough, and I know it I was gonna say, I was thinking much in the same way, like what you were talking about, that we could talk for hours about, the redemption or anything like this, and I was gonna say much in the same way that, like, I think biblical masculinity as a topic, we will not be doing it full justice by trying to come up with what I'm about to ask you. So I'm prefacing this all by saying, like, I don't intend to, all encompass all the nuances and the intricacies of what it means to be a biblical man. But what would you
Fair enough.
say? Yeah, I'm trying to make it easy. What are, like, some tangible things, or like what are things that, like, men are called to be? Like, what are the traits of, like, a masculine man? Like, what would you say that in terms of, like, again, not knowing that we're not going to do a full list, but, like, kind of what would a list be like?
Yeah, what's
And
a bullet point list look like?
Yeah, what would be the characteristics or something that we can strive for? And I think that would be interesting to break down as we keep going.
Sure. I'll preface my answer by saying I am working on a list like that, sort of.
Oh, okay.
But it's such my personality type is one that's so obsessed with logical systems and perfection to a fault that I'm really scared to, like, name anything specific that just would immortalize it in my fears. Of course it wouldn't, but
Sure.
so I am working on that list, but I know it all because what's funny is now I'm going to kind of branch into part A, part B. So part A
Sure.
is there's so many things that I would say a biblically masculine man is that, like, apply to women too,
Yeah.
like your identity as a woman needs to be in God as well.
Right.
Your confidence as a woman needs to come from your calling, not, and those are things that make a man and a woman. And I think really the difference between a masculine man and a feminine woman, biblically speaking, really revolves around the calling. You mentioned the 300 guys, that have that body and that, the war, the aggression, the stereotypical traditional manhood look about them, right? So how does that mate with the guy that is, small and just doesn't have a very good musculature, can't grow facial hair, doesn't like big trucks, he's really into coding, he's got a more feminine voice, I could go on.
Yeah.
But he wants to follow God. He wants to be a masculine man. How does the 300 model mate with him? Well, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because it's not about the external. So I'll say, as a man, it's about what you are called to do in your life at the time. So much of it is about, to what I said earlier, marriage and family, but that it has to be deeper than that, right? Because a man can be single.
Mm-hmm.
A man doesn't have to have a family. So when you start thinking about, okay, what does biblical masculinity look like? It's kind of part B. What we have to realize is this is a distinctively Western question and problem.
Yeah.
And it's a distinctively modern Western question and
Absolutely.
problem.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't have as much to say, I think, as we would like it to about masculinity per se, simply because we didn't need it. They didn't need to discuss gender
true.
roles very much.
So
Yeah.
true, man. So true.
The problem of masculinity in the West has emerged in the past about 150 years or so, with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, for one,
Amen.
and with the secularization of our culture, for two.
Mm-hmm.
And the dawn of the Industrial Revolution really made the manly things, if you will, strength, aggression, persistence, tenacity, these things that the men had to do just to survive on a day-to-day basis in the West, whether you're at war, whether you're protecting your home, you're a settler, you're a miner, these very manual labor intensive kind of jobs, those started to go away, and the value of traditional masculinity started to go away with that. But what we have to understand is that in the past 150 years of human existence, I mean, it's a very new thing.
Right.
A book I read recently, it's good food for thought. It's called The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. I wouldn't recommend everything he says, but he lays out a very clear progression of if the lights turned off tomorrow, number one, men and women would keep having sex.
Right. Right.
If there's an apocalyptic situation, men and women would keep having sex. Women would bear children. They would become vulnerable. They wouldn't be able to gather food. The men would have to protect the woman. He basically just rebuilds traditional gender roles. That would happen if we lost all of these modern conveniences. So Rosie, that's a long, long way of answering. I don't think the Bible necessarily outlines what is a godly man in principle so much as it does by example. So if I had to codify a single example for you or a single principle for you, I think it would be groundedness. So the masculine is grounded, and the feminine, and a lot of people in the resurgence against feminism and MGTOW and all that is like somehow femininity is bad. No, it came from God. It's a part of God. But the masculine itself is stable and grounded, and kind of long seeing, future oriented.
Yeah.
Well, what's the big picture? And then the feminine, by contrast, is dynamism, dance, flowing, and beauty and change, which are all good things as well. But I think that's, if I was to give you one role that the godly man plays, it's the role of groundedness. He's solid, he's stable, he's immovable. I think that's why identity is so huge for men, is because the guys in 300, right? We'll go back to them. That they're pretty solid, immovable, stable. They look pretty rugged. Like you can't really knock them over. Yeah. And that's a physical appearance, and it's all based in physical things in the body, and all those things fade. Put 35 years on any of those guys, and you'll be able to knock them over a lot easier because time does a number on you, right? And we don't want to think about that, but it does, and that's why that's not a good source of identity. And that's why those guys are not ultimately going to be grounded and stable and good leaders and good men, is because their identity is coming from, the superficial. So groundedness, I think, would be a good place to start.
And, something that you mentioned earlier about at the very beginning about confidence, in the Lord and not in your education, your status or your physical, stature, all of those things can change. Like you could be rich,
right.
You could be completely rich one day and overnight lose it all. You could be a specimen of physical, athleticism and get into a severe car accident and be paralyzed. Yeah. So confidence in these temporary things is just going to fall short. And even if you're blessed, to have a long life of health and look good, the Bible's still pretty clear about beauty becoming fading, right. And it does. Me being 5 decades old, now I know that life throws some weird curves at people, and it can do a number on people. And one of the things it can do is it can take them out, or it can build them up. They can really come out of the other side of it strengthened, more grounded, as you're saying, Luke, and they actually are living a better reality. All of these facades have been kind of lifted, and they're living in a better reality.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of like the thing that where there's really only two, I would say, well, not only two. This is very much kind of just for the sake of the ease of example that most of the time, like when we're treated with hard things, like I'll speak for me, that typically And I won't say which one I do more of because, but like when something that is a trouble or a trial, testing by God, there's usually the way I think of it. There's two responses that I usually go to: is why is why did God do this to me? Why is he doing this to me? Blah, 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 blah. Like, poor me, poor me, poor me. The other thing is like, oh, what is God teaching me from this? Is he going to, he typically draws nearer to me. In the past, every time I've gone through tough stuff, like I have a very easy, quick forgetter that like throughout my life, God, gets closer to me and, draws near to me in times of trouble and stuff like that. But much in the same way, like what you were saying is like the confidence that it comes from, my own confidence is none, because as soon as God throws me something a little difficult
beyond your ability, right?
Yeah, beyond my ability, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I have nothing and now I'm, like useless and everything. But it's just interesting, those two things of like what you were kind of saying is there's these two responses of how people deal with this stuff. They can either, like you said, be more invigorated in God by,
right,
seeing one side of it, just seeing the two different sides of the coin, like taking the good or taking it the bad way. And it's for, I think Christians are those two kind of responses of being mad at God for having this happen, or being grateful that God is here with us as we go through it.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Right.
When you, like on your Instagram, when you do your reels and stuff, and I want to encourage you to keep doing that. I think it's really beneficial. I mean, I know it's growing and it's fairly new for you and everything, but I just want I want to encourage you in it. I think it's going to speak truth to people that need to hear it. In particular, some men that might be in a similar situation you're in, but, when you speak that truth and you begin to speak the reality of confidence in Christ alone, and my identity is founded in Him and not in my abilities or whatever. Isn't it interesting how people don't want to hear that, and you get like a backlash for that?
Absolutely. It's really, that's the hardest thing, Turner, about all of this, is because it would be so easy to tell people what they want to hear. And right now, the push, like the really popular push in kind of the kind of conservative manosphere, I'll call it that. A lot of it, there's a lot of like Christian-esque influencers that, say God and stuff, or like, God and guns and that kind of stuff. And I'm not against any of that, but like, they're still rooting their teachings and their influences. It's all about women. Like, how do you get women?
Yeah.
How is it all about, like, if you're single, how do you get a girl? If you're with a girl, how do you make sure she treats you right? How do you make sure she doesn't slap you around? Maintain your frame, all these things. Mm-hmm. And that's where all the views and all the, like, that's what everyone wants to see, is they want to see some tough guy with a hot girl telling you how you can be the same as him.
Right.
And there's the flex thing. It's the 300 is what it is. Mm-hmm. And because it's an inspiring, because that's deep down inside, that's what, guys want, our flesh, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. Mm-hmm. We're all drawn toward that picture as men. And the tricky part is there anything wrong with those things? Not really. Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, there's backlash because people don't want to believe that all of the stuff they have is meaningless.
Right. They
don't want to believe that their car, their job, their status, their money, their abs, their lack of abs, whatever it is, they don't want to believe that doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. They don't. And it's hard to present it in a way that reels people in, and helps them understand, because, we want to cling to these things. And the thing is, so many of those things are good. Like the masculine calling, right? You don't have to be a decisive person in your day-to-day life, but in the context of leadership, in the context of marriage, in the context of raising a family, in the context of when there's weak weak people or weak entities around that need protection, you're called to be decisive as a man,
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't mean that the Mr. Assertive 300 guy is the pinnacle of manhood.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't. It just means that, you know, the meek, quiet, calm guy that never says anything that everyone might think is a doormat, when it's time for him to speak up, he better speak up. That's all it means, you know?
Yeah.
And that's just not as sexy. That version of masculinity is not as sexy
That's
as the 300 count, you know?
Mhm.
And so, but that's the kind that is truly sexy and is truly beautiful and is truly good in the right context.
Yeah.
And for the long haul. And, you know, and that's what God looks at. And I believe, you know, if you are a child of God, if you are truly one of God's children, then he is not going to let you as a man become 300, if you will. I'm just abusing that analogy. God will not let you become 300 if you are truly a child of his and you're trying to root your identity in all of that.
Yep.
If you're trying to root your identity in the bank account, in the six pack, in the appearance, in the hot piece on your arm, if you're trying to root your identity in those things, then a gracious Father will not allow you to have any of it until your identity is with him.
Yeah.
And who wants to hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, man. And I can I add something to that if you don't mind?
Sure.
On the 300 sort of thing, like I do want to say that in my experience as a man, I've never been some big, you know, I'm 5'8", 190 pounds. So, you know, and I could lose probably 15 pounds and I'd be good to go. But I've discovered that when I buffet my physical body, it actually strengthens my inner man to the point of where I can endure more difficult things in my life. When I break my flesh down, when I buffet it, when I, you know, and I think Paul talks about how like there is some benefit that comes from physical exercise, you know. So I don't want to discount that for people because there's a lot of discipline you can learn in your life, you can develop in your life when you hit the gym. There's you're attacking your flesh in a lot of ways as long as you don't let it become a lot of guys will start going to the gym, they start to see gains and then they become like in love with their body. you know,
Right.
That's where it goes wrong, you know.
Well, I was going to say, you know, kind of an interesting point. I was talking with some friends the other day. We were just talking about, I promise this will tie into what you're saying, the prevalence of steroids use in these, which is so just ridiculous that I'm about to say Instagram influencers or social media, whatever, TikTok now, I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't use social media, but like these people, or perfect example, movie actors, all Gerard Butler, all those guys. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to. I'm probably talking out my butt, but I know that like that's an unspoken thing, even with bodybuilder. You know, like all these guys that take it, and I'm not even talking about like Mr. Olympia. I'm talking the big dudes at your gym. If you're at like a serious weightlifting gym, those big dudes, there's a point where like you get so caught up in this thing that like you'd be willing to do anything to get bigger, or you know, there's a lot of
your identity becomes that,
right, and there's a lot of at least from my understanding, or you know, whatever. I don't want to make definitive statements on that as a whole, but there's the good of it is like I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was either like Socrates, Aristotle, or Plato that said, you know, it's and I'm paraphrasing it really terribly right now, but it's like it's the biggest shame of a man to never know like just how strong he can possibly be, you know, by the exertion and the battle of, you know, fighting against, you know, your body and like lifting and becoming strong. And it's like a big shame to never take advantage of that and like not know what it means to be like a strong man, that you're confident, you know, you get some confidence from that. But I was going to say, the whole thing is like, just in the same way that like, I think the church kind of puts this masculine thing on this identity on, like once you reach this platform, there's another plateau, and then there's another thing you're always reaching for. First it's marriage, then it's children, then it's having a good job to prepare, then it's making sure your children are good, and then it makes sure that, you're having good, they're raising good kids.
Then retirement.
There's always these things that like become of a biblical man, much in the same way that like, I think just Satan can use all these different rabbit holes. I'm thinking there's nothing wrong with, being healthy and training your body and, defeating your flesh, and that kind of thing, like warring against that. And that's a very masculine urge to, struggle well. They say it, like just struggle and to, conquer, but doing it, for the good reason of like, to be a better husband, like I want to be strong, or I want to be in shape so that I can, be there for my friends, or I can, I enjoy it, or I want to be around to see my kids and I'm 100 pounds overweight. You should probably start looking at your thing and worrying about your physical health to be there to display physical, manly things. Like there's other aspects around that, but it's that cult of like always needing to be bigger. If you get caught up in something that is good, the physical strength and all that, it can lead to idolatry very easily. Of then you're doing all this crazy stuff that is just not it's just not realistic, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you, Rosie. And I'll do you another one too. I'm a huge proponent of every man working out, every man doing weight training. Not because it has anything to do with identity, although it does, provide a lot of benefits. And of course, just like any good thing, it can become an idol, an obsession, an identity source, which is, got to watch out for that. But, it's easy when you think about it this way, in space, right? In the absence of gravity, the human body deteriorates, and they have to do, they're trying to come up with how do we prevent that? You have to do exercises in space, so you're not deteriorating too much. Well, back to what I said about the Industrial Revolution and these things in the West, men, that Paul, if he wrote, I know what reference you're talking about, bodily exercise does profit a little bit. Yeah, but like the dude was also making tents every day.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing that we're so weird and different here in the West in 2022 is, for the past 100 years, we just haven't needed to exert our bodies in daily life.
That's
and
true.
Now that we don't have to, it's not like we're living in space. We're not living in space and like literally our bones are not deteriorating,
right.
Like in that, but in a similar regard, like we're missing something. This is broken. This is not how God designed us to live.
Amen.
God did not design us to be stimulated with caffeine all day, eat trashy food, and have high cortisol levels when we're at a desk and can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
He designed us to be out in the wild where when those cortisol levels come up, we're able to take care of the threat physically, or we're able to work and mitigate it, or, have some sort of a physical reaction. And to your point earlier, just there's no need for resistance. There's no need for pain, putting oneself through adversity. And that was part of everyday life nearly 100 years ago in human existence. And so not only would I say it's okay and good, I would say it's needed for men to get in the gym, from a testosterone perspective too. Not that that's the holy grail. And that's walking the fine line too with what I'm doing, because I want people, the reason it's called Narrow Way Man is because it's this narrow way that we're all shooting for, that few will find of somehow, how do I find my identity in all the right things, but also but without rejecting the things that the world idolizes that are good things,
Yeah, right.
We should go to the gym. We should get strong. We should have good testosterone levels for our own, not everyone's going to have, high levels, but we should all work reasonably to become the best physical men that we can be, the best spiritual men that we can be, the best financial men that we can be.
Yeah.
You know, all those things are good, but how do we walk that line of, you know what, God is first, and God is not only is he first, but he is at the foundation of it. He's in the middle of it. He's completely, it's all about him and for him. You know, that's why it's the narrow way man, is because you don't want to reject any of these traditionally masculine things, but once you make it about those things, you've lost your way.
Yeah, that's right.
Turn it over to God. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, there was no gyms pre-industrial revolution because your life was a gym.
Yeah.
You were walking a lot more. You were working in a field, planting and harvesting, you know, as a farmer, or as you said, as a coal miner. A lot of my relatives were coal miners, and from Kentucky area. And
You tell them you got to go
to the gym after your work. Yeah. Getting to work
12 hours in the coal. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They get to work. It's dark. They work in the dark, and then they come out. It's dark. It's like, you know, their whole life, and then they die of black lung. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, I'm for that too, and I think like I'll give you an example. I was texting with a buddy of mine, and I was reading up. You know, I'm kind of Rosie. If you've listened to our podcast for any amount of time, you know we go into the fringe and the conspiracy stuff every once in a while, and we're not afraid to talk about it. And so what that does is that puts me in places on the internet where I'm reading stuff. And one of the things that I was looking at was that there's a prediction of a supply chain breakdown coming with food. And so I was texting with my buddy, and unfortunately he doesn't live close to me, but he's a good friend, and he's an avid hunter. And I was like, hey man, how do you clean a deer?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking ahead as a leader and provider, you know, and protector of my family. If the supply chain breaks down, I'm going to need a freezer full of meat so that I can feed my family if it's not available from the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And just trying to think ahead. Before Biden was elected, there was all these rumors going around that the power grid was going to break down or was going to go out. In particular where we live, it was a big high stress time. And so I went out and I bought a generator, a propane powered generator for my house and for my family, so that if things went sideways, I was prepared as a leader. And just thinking that way was exerting my masculinity, and it was teaching my son, it was showing my wife and my daughters that, you know, I'm going to do whatever I can to take care of you and provide and help you. You know, I'm thinking about you ahead of myself. And I think it, like, honestly, between you and me, I think it turned my wife on a little bit. I think it kind of rolled back to me in a good way, you know? Jeez. It's true, though.
Well, it's God's design.
Yeah.
Right?
God designed it to work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, you know, this is kind of jumping back quite a bit, but much in the same way, you know, I'm sure you're familiar, and if not, then I apologize for saying I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it was really interesting, kind of jumping back to something you had said was, I don't know if I've talked a lot about this guy on our podcast, or I can't remember. It's been so long since we've just been doing all this. I'm sure I have, but are you familiar with like Roosh V, the guy from like he was like the pickup artist back in the Manosphere, you know, a couple years ago?
That rings a bell. Did he write like a guide or something?
Yeah. So he basically, he was like the one of these like huge, he had this really popular website in like the early 2010s, I want to say, something like that. Maybe a little prior to that. I'm not a Roosh biographer by any means, but he was basically like this like one of the biggest pickup artists. He had, you know, like this website called Return of Kings, and it was all about just like, he was one of the leaders of like the neo-masculinity, where it's like, you know, exactly like what you're talking about, kind of like the Dan Blazarian version of like masculinity. Like, you need to be sleeping with hot, you know, 9s and above. You need to be doing it, you know, different chick all the time. You know, your body count needs to be really high. If that, you know, all these things, you need to be, like you said, learn how to keep frame, how to
the worst of the masculine
pickup.
stuff.
Yeah. But the key about it was, it's like all that stuff is the perfect, I was going to say the pickup artist kind of stuff is, it's very tricky because they do inadvertently teach guys how to be, more like they harness a masculine trait and then use it in the wrong version. So it's pulling it. And I think that's why it was such a big resurgence. It was a big thing. Anyways, so that's where Roosh was. And he wrote all these books about, he spent, I want to say like 10, 15 years traveling all over the world, just picking up girls, sleeping with them, and then writing books about how to pick up girl. I think he had like 20 books, and they were all like, 300-page books.
But we honestly don't recommend them to any of our listeners.
Well, I'm not. Why don't you listen to them?
Okay. All right.
Hopping in a little too early.
Sorry there, brother.
Prematurely there. Anyway, so he would write like a book about, this is how you get girls in Estonia. This is how you get them in Argentina. Anyway, come to find out, he's living this way for 15 years, all this stuff. His sister dies of cancer. He finds Christianity and immediately, like overnight, becomes like, returns to his faith of like a Armenian Orthodox and like dispels everything. He unpublishes all those old books. So I was going to say, you can't even buy his old books anymore. He unpublishes them.
Sweet.
And he just like, he's been keeping it up for like 3 years of being like, disavowing every single thing. And one of the biggest things, so this is kind of like the story of why it's really interesting with this guy in particular, of going from like this, and he completely disavows all the stuff. So it's always these cautionary tales that I think are really interesting, in particular about like the girl stuff. And because I think, there probably are a lot of single guys that are listening to this, and this is kind of where I'm segueing into, is basically, he full on radical transformation. It's the real deal. He's been holding on for 3 years and just been getting more, giving all the glory to God, disavowing all the old stuff, and, becoming chaste until he's married, all this crazy stuff, disavowing it. And really talking about just the emptiness of all the stuff. Here was this guy that was making all this money, sleeping with all these girls, living what would seem like the masculine, I'm using quotes here, like the 300 masculine worldly view of success, of like what it means to be a masculine man. And, he just talks about how empty it was and how destroying of his soul it was. And so kind of, transitioning towards that of, what would you say to like the guys out there who are, caught between these two kind of extremes of, when you're looking for this masculine influence, it's either, do these things so you can get chicks, you're less of that, or the church that's saying, if you don't have a chick, by you're 22 and you're not married, you're like a failure. And then these guys are saying, if you haven't, slept with 20 girls by the time you're 22, you're a failure. Like, what would you say for the single man kind of, that's, I think there's a lot of people here are, what should they focus on besides just weightlifting, which I think is really good. I'm sorry, that was a really long-winded way. I'm very long-winded with my things.
No, man, it's all so good. Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from there. And I am one of those guys. I deeply desire to have a wife and kids. I do. And
same here.
In all transparency, it's a big struggle for me every day. I know a lot of good things to say about identity and about masculinity, but when push comes to shove, it's a daily surrender for me to say, you know what, God, you used that, 6 years I was with my ex-wife, you used that for your glory. You have a plan, you have a purpose, all these things. So my answer, and this is really big. I'm glad you asked this question, because this answer, I think, speaks to the future of whatever single guy is listening. So if you're a single guy and you're listening, or one, it is all about positioning yourself now to attract the right woman.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you do that is so counterintuitive to what you would think. Have you, this is kind of a long shot, but have you ever seen, either one of you guys seen Tears of the Sun with Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both? Okay. All right. So Bruce is, doing the Bruce thing. He's playing this character of this, hardened vet, this war guy, right? And he's got this mission. He goes, into the jungles of Africa to kind of do this extraction thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the premise of the movie. And of course, Dr. What's-Her-Face, this pretty lady, right, that enters the picture, and you're kind of thinking, okay, great, they're going to, become a thing at some point. But what's great about this movie is Bruce Willis is just so, he's not rude to her, he's not mean to her, he's kind, but he's just so agnostic to her because he's so focused on his mission. And it was only at the very end of the movie, as they're kind of going away in this helicopter, that you see her lean her head against his shoulder. And he kind of acknowledges it and says, okay, we can be a thing now. And it's because he's so obsessed with what his calling is and what his purpose is that he's not derailed by this beautiful woman that is, she's kind of a part of it, but she's not the focus. And I call it just kind of the Tears of the Sun principle of, as a young man, the women, the best way to attract the woman is going to be to not concern yourself with them and to concern yourself with what God has called you to in your life right here, right now. So often we're listening to the culture, we're listening to our peers, or we're looking at someone we respect and we're projecting their future onto our present and thinking we should be like them. And there's a still small voice, if we would listen to it, that wants, God wants to engage with us where we're at. And the right woman is going to come to you if you focus on anything but her, or everything but her. You focus on your calling, your purpose, your identity in Christ. She will be attracted to you because, and here's the bomb. The bomb is women, are wired both biologically and emotionally to want stability, security, and strength.
Yep.
And nothing screams weakness, instability, and insecurity like a man who does anything for the approval of a woman.
Yep.
So young men, single guys, older single guys, husbands, if you are going to the gym to get that six pack to impress your future wife, your current wife, your girlfriend, you need to reevaluate it, because anything that we do as men to seek validation or approval from women, or anyone for that matter, is not sourced in strength and true masculinity. It's sourced in this need, this toxic need for validation and approval and pride.
Yeah.
And so if you can take your focus completely off of the validation of random girls, your girlfriend, future wife, whatever it is, you can separate everything you do from that validation. That is exactly how you'll get that validation. Long term. You can play the game for a while. There's a lot of alpha chads out there that can do the steroids. They got the great jobs. They got the great body, but they're doing it because they need validation. Yeah. And whenever they settle down, and whenever his wife yanks that chain and unravels the wrap and realizes there's nobody underneath, that's when things are going to get really sad for him. And that's when things are going to get really sad for you, young man listening, is whenever you finally land this girl, or you get the prize, whatever it is, and then she leans into you in real life, in real time, real tragedy hits, real crisis hits, whatever it is, or real conflict happens in your marriage, and there's nothing for her to lean into. That's when we have a problem.
Yeah.
So if you want to build the real foundation that the godly young woman is going to be attracted to and say, you know what, that is strength, that's stability, and that's masculinity, and I'm attracted to that. That turns me on. If you want to build that, you have to be like Bruce Willis and focus on your mission, your objective, your calling that's right in front of you. You'll see the pretty girls, they'll come and go. And then the one that needs to stay with you will stay with you, because your Father only gives you good things. He's going to take care of you.
Yeah, and I was going to say, dude, that was brilliant.
Those were nuggets right there, buddy.
That was great.
Nuggets for our single men out there.
And I was going to say, just to add on to that, the perfect, this was just in my mind when you're talking about Tears of the Sun in the movie, is the whole thing of, it wasn't, the reason that he wasn't like letting her, like you were saying, he balances that line of like being a jerk to it. It's not, completely ignoring all the advances of, because sometimes, we can be, I hasten to say, and I know you are not saying this, is like, you're so hyper-focused on this that sometimes you might miss the girl might come around, and, if you're too hyper-focused, you can be a jerk to it. It's not about, just dismissing all women and saying like, I'm only like all this kind of stuff, and, being this very dismissive thing. The whole thing about like in that movie is the reason that Bruce Willis, I can't remember the character's name, the guy that was doing it, was because it would have gotten in the way of the mission. If he would have started this rendezvous, is all of a sudden, if he takes his head off of what he's doing, like I can't remember the time frame. It was in the 90s where it takes place, and I can't remember what African country was going on. It was in the middle of a civil war, if I can't remember, if I remember correctly, is if he starts dismissing of what he's doing, if he starts, letting his guard down, so to speak, of, oh, where are we going to go sneak off to, go have this romantic rendezvous or anything like that, while he's still worried about extracting, getting his team, safe, completing the mission, then you can focus on all the other stuff, is he's letting down the people that are relying upon him there. Right. If he starts worrying about her so much, he's going to start,
kowtowing to her.
Well, not even that, but people are going to die. If he's not in there and he's holding, to his mission and doing everything will go badly. Yeah. He needs to be there. So I was going to say that I was just kind of thinking of that as when you're saying that, there was a purpose for it. It wasn't just to be kind of like this. I'm just trying to, kind of say the other side of, remember, and I know you're not saying this, but, you're not saying just be totally, MGTOW, just, hating women and all that kind of stuff by any means. But exactly. And I was just going to say, much in the same way, because we do have a large female population that listens to this, to find tidbits. And I know we've been talking about both sides of this, is these are the kind of things that, like, a woman, that if you're a single Christian woman right now, like, these are the traits that, like, to look for in a biblical guy. Right, these are the kind of things, a guy that is not, going to be a pushover, whenever you say something, that has his own opinion, like, that stands strong, is confident in Christ, if you get into a fight, he's not going to start crying, like all this kind of stuff.
And can I make a little aside too?
Please. Yeah, go ahead. I'm done with that. Yeah.
Right. Just a really, a much more relatable guy to think about is Han Solo. So to your point of the Star Wars guy. Yeah. So to your point of, hey, Bruce, I mean, his character in Tears of the Sun, he was not being a jerk to be a jerk. And he wasn't even really being a jerk. He was just, politely, doing his thing and not really engaging with the woman because the mission took priority at that time. Right. So, that type of situation is not as flashy and it's not as, sexy necessarily. Whereas you have Han Solo doing the same thing, and he is going to jeopardize the mission to flirt. He's going to jeopardize the mission to be sexy and to flash a smile and to do cheeky things to gain attention. Mm-hmm. And you can do that too as a young man. And you can divert your gaze from, a single-minded pursuit of God and his calling for you. You can do that and flirt around. But who's going to do better in marriage, guys?
Yeah.
Who's going to do
Right.
better in the long haul? And who's going to attract the right kind of woman?
Right.
You know, the Han Solos of the world don't do well in marriage, and they don't do well finding wife material.
Yes.
They can hook up, and they can look good, and they can be flashy, but they are not going to settle down well, and they're not going to find a woman worth fighting for and worth dying for, unfortunately.
Dude,
I mean, Han
what-
Solo ends up he doesn't stay with Princess Leia, right? You're the Star Wars guy, right?
no, they don't. They have a son who's complete. Kylo Ren is their son, and
There you
he's
go.
he
Perfect
becomes like,
example.
yeah, he
That's
tries
the
to be
word.
Darth
Don't
Vader.
Yeah.
He wants to be his grandpa. I was gonna say, my train of thought just got disrupted. Oh, the irony of everything that you're saying about when a man truly sets his heart on those things and becomes that way is he actually becomes more attractive
Yeah.
to women.
Exactly.
And you said it's
Exactly.
counterintuitive. And what's funny to me is that this is why in those stories, the bad guys get the girls. Like, you know how nice guys finish last is the phrase or whatever. And that's the big dilemma for Christian men, I notice, is like they have single Christian guys in particular. They're in a singles group or a young adults group or whatever, or just they have a bunch of friend group, and they have these women, and they've got to be the nice guy and walk, make sure the girls are walking to their car when it's dark, and all the stuff that is proper and good and that truly are masculine. But it comes across as like it just comes across as like trying to get in the good graces and earn a spot.
It's slimy.
And
That's because that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do.
a lot of
That's why it
times,
comes across that way. It's because they're trying to do it.
right?
Exactly.
So when you have and correct me if I'm wrong on this, when you have the mindset of if you choose to be with me, you're gonna be good. It's gonna be good for you. Like that's the confidence. It's not like arrogance, but it's confidence in the sense of I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to love you well. I'm going to support you. These things that are waiting that you long for and that you're made for, I'm actually going to fulfill them. When you have that air about yourself, like you just know it, it's the weirdest thing. Women are just attracted to this confidence that men carry about themselves, and they're not threatened by other men around. They're not intimidated by other men around, and things like that. It's just a presence, and it's very attractive to a woman, especially a woman who is grounded in her faith and knows what she's looking for in a man. You could stand out in a crowd of 1,000 men because they can see it, because that's what they're designed for. I don't know.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. If you carry yourself in such a way where you are a complete, and this hits home for me and you, Rosie. If you walk and carry yourself in such a way that you know that you are a complete,
Yes.
powerful son of the King, with or without a woman by your side,
Right.
if you can get in that headspace, then you're going to attract plenty of the right kinds of women to you. And women are intuitively way smarter than us, typically.
That's right.
Stereotypical. Their intuition is so good that, to your point, I mean, you can, in a crowd of 1,000 with very limited interaction, the woman will be able to pick up if they're in a phase of life where they are looking for a stable life partner in a man.
Yeah.
They will pick up on that. They will pick up on cockiness versus confidence,
Mm-hmm.
humility versus false humility. They'll pick up on the nice guy holding the door open for them because they couldn't be 6'2" and have all these, the money and the body and the looks. They'll see that guy opening the door for them, and they'll know that for what it is. And then they'll see the confident, humble, I am what I am and I'm good with it either way guy that opens the door.
Yeah.
And that'll be hot to them. You're dead on.
Yeah. And it doesn't change in marriage, by the way. It just doesn't. Men that are married, that you need to continue with that mindset through your marriage and serving your wife. I mean,
Yes.
a woman is attracted to those things. They need to stay attracted to you in marriage. And that's why a lot of marriages fail, because men just get comfortable, or they're not at that place and the woman may have been desperate, saw you as the best possible option, got married to you, and then found out, oh man, I made a big mistake, and now they're in a pickle. They don't know what to do. And so you have all these things. In marriage, it doesn't change. You're actually building on that same set of that framework to create a healthy, vibrant, loving, romantic, passionate marriage.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Turner, I'm going to snag on that point. I'll snag on that point you said earlier. You said a lot of times after marriage, the guys kind of give up or become complacent, right?
Yeah.
They kind of die off. So why is that? It's because they were doing those things to get her validation, to get her approval. And that's why I'm telling the single guys, don't go down that road, because then when you finally do get married, you're going to stop, bro. If you're in the gym getting the 6-pack right now so you can attract the hottie, guess what? Once you get her, you're going to let yourself go, dude.
Yep.
Like, you're going to give her a bait and switch, my man, if you are pursuing those things for the wrong reasons. So you got to get real with yourself. You got to get real with yourself. But go ahead. I just wanted to make that tangent.
No, I was going to say, I think the perfect example, and maybe just you've been so gracious with talking to us, and so grateful, and there's been so much great stuff that's been said. Is I think that like the biggest or takeaway that I was thinking, and to kind of use an analogy real quick, is I have some I don't know if I ever talked about it on the podcast, but I've got some couple friends. We interviewed a guy that was this total guy that I'm about to explain. I have a friend of mine who just ridiculously badass special forces dude, did tons of tours, overseas, came back, went back out as a contractor, got shot, died a couple times, brought back to life, just badass dude. And he's ridiculously he's quiet, now. And when we walk into like a room when we're hanging out, everyone, he doesn't do anything. Just his presence there is like this confidence that everyone just like, it radiates. And it always is with these guys that like, they have this, and it's trying to figure out what is it about my buddy that like just radiates this. And it's this true confidence that comes from, like this. And maybe I'm just using this as an example of kind of a different way, is like his confidence is any room that he walks into, there's no threats to him. He is
not physically anyway.
There's no physical threats.
Right, yeah.
He's the alpha, and he's going to make sure that everything's okay. So he doesn't have to worry, and people can read off that. And it's that's that true confidence that just comes from within. He doesn't think about it. It's just this thing that he's just an innate knowing in himself, and he's just that kind of confidence. And it works, but much in the same way of like, what is true confidence in the sense of like for men. And I think it was really great how we distilled it, you guys distilled it, was it's not this cockiness, like you said, it's not this arrogance, but and the women, you can tell the difference. Guys can tell the difference between other guys that have this.
Right.
The true confidence is, like you said, being grounded in identity and being unshakable in knowing that we come through, we are all that we have comes from God, that is unchanging. He views us the same. He loves us regardless, and that's not, and, we can walk into any room, so to speak. And if we're grounded in Christ, if we're grounded in knowing who we are, we don't have to worry about anything. Like nothing that it doesn't matter what people think about us when we walk into a room. We don't have to be nervous because we have our identity grounded in Christ. We know what he says about us. When we really internalize that, and I'm not perfect at this by any means. I'm not trying to say that I have this by any means, but it's like when I am in that mode of being rooted in that, I don't care what other people think about me. And that comes off as that's what the genuine confidence is. It's not, I don't care about what anyone thinks about me because I'm so great and I know it. It's, I know exactly who I am, and I'm okay with being that person. And that's the thing.
Yep.
That's the true confidence is just being okay with,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Luke, we've been going on for an hour and a half now, so this has been fantastic. But I wanted to kind of wrap things up a little bit here with what are some of the things you do in your life as you're taking this journey to support yourself? Like, what kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? Has it been difficult for you to find other guys that are, that you can be friends with, that are in that confidence journey, in that walking, committed to Christ, and maybe even in the same spot, or even maybe they're engaged or they're even married? What would you recommend? Like, some of the things to look for? How, like, one guy, two guys? Like, I mean, what's working for you? Or are you still trying to figure that out? Like, where are you at with that?
Yeah, great question. And before I forget, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been a real blessing chatting with you guys tonight. I really appreciate it.
Same.
I would say a big thing you can do that I'm doing, find a couple guys that have been through terrible marriages that have like made it out the other side, and that seem to be the type of man that you would be okay becoming. If you can find a couple guys like that, it's massive, because they have figured this stuff out.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily, Jedi masters, but they're pretty close, a lot of them. And they're just real, and they're humble, and they're kind of like your special ops guy. They're not necessarily these flashy dudes. But they've been through it, and they can give you nuggets of wisdom. I think it's in Proverbs. It says wisdom, there's wisdom deep in the heart of man, and you have to go get it. Like, sometimes you got to go get it. So I've got some of those guys, super helpful. I would say it is tough on a peer level basis to find guys that have either, I'm not special. God just put me through a trial that helped me understand some things that I never would have understood if I didn't go through that trial. So I'm not special, but it is hard to find guys who have been through something like that at my age. Typically that kind of thing doesn't happen to you until later on, where you kind of have to redefine your masculinity. And it's rare that happens in a Christian environment, which I'm thankful that God kept my faith strong through the whole deal. Super blessed with that. But then the other thing I would recommend is drawing on your knowledge of Scripture, getting into the Scripture more as needed, and just writing out some truths about your identity that resonate with you, and literally reciting, affirming those every day, not in the woo-woo sense, not in the secret, not in the law of attraction sense,
right,
but literally in the sense of, I'm going to memorize, and I'm going to recite, and I'm going to drill into my head the truth about my identity, the truth about God's promises in my life. I recommend doing it every day, because guess what? The enemy is out there every day telling you the lies. You're hearing the lies every day in the culture, in the media, from your peers. Your own self is telling you lies. And if you're not taking your daily dose of, identity truths, it's just going to be that much harder for you. So I would recommend those two things: a mentor, and multiple mentors, guys that have been through it, and then guys that are for truths that you can recite and meditate on from the Bible on your identity.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. That is great.
Yeah.
That is great. Man, Luke, this has been a great hour and a half of just kind of unpacking, your story here. And I honestly, what you said, which is so cool, is you're like, I'm not anybody special. God just sent something in my life that was really challenging, and I'm trying to walk through it. And what's amazing is, I think that what the Lord's doing in your life is actually going to help equip other men, because it's not an unfamiliar route or path that many men are going to get put on that you've been on,
Right.
And I appreciate you being transparent and just humble about it. It's really cool, and it's needed. Listen, I say this often in our podcast with our guests. You have an open door. If you ever write something or put a blog together or anything like that, let me know. I want to let our listeners know. And I want to just encourage our listeners to go follow you on Instagram. It's @narrowwayman on Instagram. That's all I know. I don't know if I haven't really looked for you on Twitter or anything like that, and I don't know if you even are. But I know you're there.
That's all we got.
Yeah, that's what you got. Okay. And it's a great, it's a great burgeoning resource there that he's just, I can tell you're a busy man. You've got a lot going on, and it's one of those things that maybe you didn't expect it to do what it's doing, but I'm really thankful for it, and I just want to wish you the best and continued success in whatever, however God unfolds the rest of what he has for you in the future. You're setting yourself into a good spot, the way your heart and your attitude is, because those are the things that God truly respects and blesses.
Well, thank you, Turner. All glory to him, and I hope you're right. I believe he does have a calling for me with this, and I just I'm praying for the wisdom and the grace to pursue that. But thank you so much for the encouragement. It means a lot.
Yeah, man. Don't stop it. And if you need encouragement, just hit me up, and I'll put you back on the path. Right? I'm just kidding.
Same goes.
Awesome.
I might be calling you.
Hey, men need that. Men need that.
They do. They do, man. They do for sure. Awesome. Well, Luke, thank you so much, man. This has been really fun. And, we will put all of your contact information on our show notes of the podcast. So anyone listening, just go to the show notes and you can see the connection there for his Instagram account. And Luke, maybe we'll get you back on again some other time here soon, and or just pick your brain on some other things. I know you're thinking through a lot of stuff. So it's just been great to talk with you.
I second that. Thank you so much. Be happy to chat with you guys later. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, brother. Yeah. Well, thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Turner. Thanks, Rosie. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the All Out War podcast today. If you had a blast, then we'd love to have you back for another episode. So please subscribe and leave a review. We love to hear from you. You can also follow us on Instagram at All Out War Podcast or on Twitter at AOWcast. These episodes are also available on YouTube, unless they contain a little too much truth. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.